today's episode, we're joined by John, who shares his and his partner's experience of finding their family, navigating the matching process, and welcoming their son home. It's an honest and heartfelt conversation about patience, preparation, and the joy that comes when everything finally clicks into place.
Hi, John. It's great to have you with us today. Could you tell me a little bit about when you decided to adopt, please?
Yeah. Oh, it's great to be here. So yeah, I guess our adoption journey started in 2020, right before COVID. Um, we did a lot of research prior to that, and explored different ways into adoption. And at that point, we decided going with an adoption agency was definitely for us. We'd spoke to lots of friends. um, yeah, that's when it began. We shortly put a pause to the process with COVID hitting.
I
Um,
know. I think lots of people put pauses all over their lives, didn't they, for that for that period of time?
they did. I think we just felt the world had gone a little bit crazy, and the timing just wasn't right for us. So
Yeah.
we resumed it in 2023, so a few years later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and certainly I know, having spoken to people who went through the process during that COVID time, it was tricky to navigate. We know it's a long process anyway, and then adding in that extra pressure. So a very wise decision, I think, for you guys to kind of come back to it when you felt ready, and that's certainly something that we kind of advocate to our adopters. You've got to be ready, haven't you? So, um, I know we're kind of like jumping ahead here, but I think one of the reasons we really want to speak to you today is to think about kind of like your matching process. So, not the actual approval process at all, but kind of how you found your family. So, can you tell me a little bit about it? Was it how you expected? Is there any advice you'd give to other people?
Yeah. It definitely wasn't how I expected. I think by the time we got to matching, it had been nearly 4 years since that initial start
Yeah.
pre-COVID. So I was in the mindset of, this is going to take quite a while, 6 months, a year, 2 years. Um, and I'm quite a considered person and don't make decisions lightly. So I thought it would be a long matching stage. However, it wasn't at all. We went to three matching events in person. Um,
Were those events where the children were present, or where no? So it was kind of more of an exchange
yeah,
event where you exchange information about children, right? So you went to
yeah,
three. Mm.
yeah. So we had the first one we went to was the largest, and it had lots of different local authorities from around the country. I'd probably say there was about 25 to 30 there,
God, that's a big
and
one.
yeah, we were very overwhelmed initially because you, you just can't prepare yourself for what you see. You've got lots of different profiles of children
Mm.
and their backgrounds. So for me, I actually found that very hard. And that was almost the initial front door to the matching process. Um, we went on the matching site
Link,
at that
yeah,
point.
the link maker website, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but on the flip side of that, it was good because it was in person and you could almost promote yourself as a couple to the agencies, and um, it was good to have a matching support worker there as well, Alex, um, to go round. But that was yeah, a lot to initially deal with.
I think I'm reflecting because I attended one on my journey, and I can remember it's definitely one of the best decisions I ever made because it's ultimately how we got matched with our daughter. But I
Yeah,
do remember spending 10 minutes or so in the hall with the local authority and then having to go back to the toilets just because I needed a bit of space.
yeah,
And as it progressed, I could manage it, but it is as you've said, it's very strange and overwhelming, isn't it? The first time you kind of walk into one of those.
yeah. It really is. You just can't prepare yourself, and I think you just have to take time. Like, we
Mm,
took time out as well. We went and sat in one of the corners. Um, and I would say, on reflection, maybe we would have been better going to one of the smaller events,
yeah.
um, because the other two events were a lot smaller and they were more intimate, and I could cope better with that. Um, and I think you got more sort of one-on-one time with the different agencies. Um, but yeah, it was our second event where we saw our son's profile. And it's a bit strange. Like, my partner was picking up profiles, I was picking up profiles, and then would sort of reconvene and review them at home, and decide which ones we wanted to find more about. And if I'm totally honest, the profile of our son to begin with, and I know, Lisa, you might echo this. I wasn't particularly keen on our son's profile, but we pursued, and it was the best decision we've ever made. And what I would say, a learning, particularly for me, is don't judge just by the initial profile. Look deeper into things, and take some time to reflect.
I think, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and like, I can't help but reflect on my own journey while you're talking, and what initially drew me towards our daughter was the fact that I got on very well with the members of staff from the local authority at that event. And I felt that I could work with them, and they felt that they could work with us. And it was much more of a sense of finding a professional that I trusted rather than an immediate connection with any one profile. The connection came much later when, as a couple, we could sit away from all the hype and kind of actually look and think and learn more about her and the other children as well. And that was when it came. It wasn't that, for me at least, it wasn't that gut connection of kind of like, this is the one. I think there's so much going on at that type of event, isn't there, that it'd be very hard for your gut to send you any messages at all apart from what's going on.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the way that agencies come across in those events is really important. And when they spoke about Daniel, they knew his background in quite a lot of detail, and you could tell from the way that she was talking that this child had so much to give, and was so happy and joyful, and that came across really, really clear. And you can tell from their reactions sometimes when maybe initially they can tell straight away that that's probably not going to be a good match, just from you know initial conversations. um but yeah, it from then onwards, it was a bit strange because my partner Danny, I've got two Daniels. My partner Danny, he was sort of pursuing with our son's profile, and in the background I was sort of looking into another profile of child. um and then after a couple of weeks we just came together and agreed that we wanted to move forward with Daniel. And what really benefited us was we did all of these events prior to any panel, so prior to adoption panel, so we were quite proactive.
Ah, so this was not when you were approved adopters. You kind of, your panel date was
Yeah,
imminent, but you
yeah,
were kind of getting it out there ahead of it. And that's really interesting, actually, being so proactive prior to panel. Mm.
yeah. So we had all our like documentation ready for adoption panel, and Alex had our sort of matchmaking profile all set up. And going back to my point earlier, I was really surprised at how quick it moved, because in going to adoption panel, we already knew that we wanted to continue with um, finding more out about Daniel, and I think we might have even had a potential initial contact um, scheduled with him. So that helped because we knew what the journey was like in front of us in some ways. And bearing in mind we took so long to get here, it was actually really exciting going into adoption panel because we could say that, we've done these events. Um, we've we've almost kind of given a little bit of PR to ourselves and got ourselves out there. Um, yeah, from adoption panel, it just flew.
I bet it did. I'm thinking, like, we have families that spend all lengths of time within the family finding process. And for a whole variety of reasons. And some people choose to take a holiday in that time because we know that becoming approved is quite a long
Yeah.
process, and it is perfectly okay to take a break. But it's
Mhm.
also perfectly okay to be proactive and be like, no, we are ready and we're eager for this next step. But it sounds like you came out of approval panel and that's it. You were straight into kind of progressing things with Daniel. That must have been really exciting.
It was, yeah. I think because we'd waited so long for this stage, we'd kind of got everything out of our system, like um, house renovations, travel, work progression, and all of those things that life brings. So we were ready for this.
Yeah.
Um, but what again worked in our favour was when we went into our initial visit with Daniel. It was the beginning of it was probably the end of spring. So our transition was over summer, and again that just made such a difference. We could spend time outside. Our contact was mainly in parks, and it was it just made a huge difference.
I second that in the being outside when the weather is clement can be
Mhm.
so helpful in lowering people's anxieties in kind of difficult things. But so we're going from spring and we're going to summer. So you'll move to being approved adopters, and then kind of like linking with Daniel. That was very quick.
Yeah,
H- Does that mean that he came home really quickly? Was it a quick transition, a long transition? What?
I think the transition was long. It was meant to be quicker, but one hiccup was finding I think it was a court date the authority had to find to sort of approve this
Right.
like match, and they missed the initial date, and then we couldn't get one for I think it was 2 or 3 months later. I don't know the ins and outs.
Yeah.
It was frustrating, but then actually we were quite relaxed because I think in total we had an 11-week period where we were seeing Daniel, and we were building that up from like a couple of hours a week to 3 to 4 days a week.
Mm.
We were really fortunate that both our employers, sorry, were really supportive, so we could take lunch times out, um, and by the end of the 11 weeks, we then went into this sort of um, not standard, but the 2 week
Uh,
period transition where
like
you
the official introductions
yeah,
period, even though you'd obviously spent 11 weeks of getting to
yeah.
know him. Yeah.
So yeah, we over those 11 weeks we got to do so much. Like we were in so many different settings, whether it be inside or outside, um, observing meal
Mm.
times, going to fairs, um, you name it. And that was great because there were certain environments where Daniel's um, behaviour was different, and we
Mm.
got to reflect on how we would deal with that. And the foster carer was super supportive in um, giving us advice.
I think I just noticed there that actually something that many adopters struggle with, or can find hard, is the speed with which introductions go. So you go from not knowing a child to parenting them in a relatively small space of time, and obviously all of you need to make the adjustment quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas it sounds like this type of longer transitions, although there would have been the initial frustration at the missed court date and not being able to get a date more quickly, what it allowed for was a much gentler,
Hmm.
gradual transition for all three of you actually to kind of get to know
Yeah.
one another, but also have space to reflect on what you're learning about the other people as well.
Yeah.
Um, I do have one question though. What did he know during those 11 weeks that you were going to be his parents? What did he call you during those 11 weeks? How were you introduced to him?
Yeah, so we were introduced as uh, John and Danny, and that we were the foster carers' friends.
That old
Um,
chestnut.
the initial meet we had was strange because it was in a park, and the initial introduction, it wasn't natural. We didn't really know what to do, but we were
Mm,
led by our social worker and the foster carer. And within like 10 minutes, it felt completely natural. You know, we were off playing with Daniel on the slide. He was giggling. We were picking daisies. It was like a bit of a moving moment. And yeah, it from there, across those 11 weeks, he just knew us as John and Danny. But at that point, Daniel couldn't really speak. He's had sort some speech therapy
yeah.
since he's been with us. Um, and I think just going back to that 11-week period, what really helped was Daniel had been in foster care for 3 years, so that's all he'd ever known.
Yeah.
So for him to have such a long transition really worked in his favour because we were almost moving at his pace rather than it being confined to a shorter
Mm,
period. Maybe at the end of that, seeing some of those behaviours that other adopters see. I don't think, well, we didn't see any unregulated behaviour in the 2 week introduction period.
right. And I'm guessing also that that 11 weeks allow, so we talk about a transfer of care, but also a transfer of trust. And so you've already mentioned that the foster care was like really supportive of you, really helped during those 11 weeks kind of support this transition. But it also gave Daniel longer to kind of understand how much the foster carer trusted you and kind of build up that trust as well. So it's that was probably a real contributing factor, plus the fact that you've also, you've experienced perhaps dysregulated behaviour during the 11 weeks. So the 2 week formal introductions wasn't really a shock, actually. It's you already know how to work with one another and what situations are likely to throw him off. So,
Yeah, definitely. And in the 2 weeks, because we had such a good relationship with his foster carer, it was almost like, oh, we're just popping round and we're going to be here for the whole day and we're going to have Sunday lunch. Like it was almost like they'd already become part of our family. Um, and yeah, it felt completely natural in the 2 weeks. Um, yeah, it was great. It was on reflection, I was thinking about this earlier this morning. It was one of the happiest times ever. That period of the 11 weeks and then the 2 weeks. It was just so special, and yeah, it was just amazing.
I know people listening to this won't be able to see our faces, but I've just got a really broad smile just watching you reflect on that because, that introductions period, it can just be truly, and that's what I'd want for every adopter is to be able to look back on and feel feel that about it. Are you still in contact with your foster carer? Or sorry, with his foster carer, not yours?
Yeah. So Daniel's been with us for well over a year now, and initially, um, as part of the that 2 week period, beyond the 2 weeks, we had I think it was bi-weekly contact in a neutral location with his foster carer. And then we also used FaceTime a lot. Um, and as time's gone on, we've gradually had less contact with her. But what we do now is we see her sort of once or twice a year, but then we'll also do things which I think ties into therapeutic parenting, like um, in the early days when he mentioned her and said that he missed her. We'd do things like arts and crafts cards, video messages. Um, we have a photo of us all together, the four of us, on our family wall, and there's also a picture frame that he can pick up. So she's always will be part of our life. But we did find as time went on, it was better for Daniel to have less contact and to understand that his foster care was always there, but um,
Not a weekly presence.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and now we're in the longer it's gone on the visit, we're in new territory where he doesn't really mention her um, in a sort of a I miss my foster.
Mm.
It's more um, he'll see a picture or see something that reminds him of her, and we'll talk about it, but we won't delve into it and his emotions unless needed to.
Yeah. It was really interesting hearing you talk about that because I hadn't considered possibly like one of the other sides of having such a long transitional period. So, you've built up a great relationship with the foster carer, you drop it into the house, you're staying for Sunday dinner. And obviously, if that ended straight away, that level of connection, that would seem really weird because you're the foster carer's friends and you spent 11 weeks, kind of fully integrated into the family. And so to have that tail off where, there's bi-weekly visits, I hadn't anticipated, but it does make a lot of sense that it would need to tail off in that way. Or it's almost like the reverse of what you guys
Yeah,
did building up, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And um, the the tailing off of sort of contact with the foster carer has initially it was quite hard because it was every 2 weeks we were sort of traveling to a different location, and um, sometimes we would see regression after those visits from Daniel naturally. Um, but yeah, as time went on, it got a lot easier, especially now he can converse more.
And I think it might also be useful for people listening, hearing about your adoption journey. Like, children can understandably initially be very sad about missing their foster carer, and we do lean into those emotions and we do kind of support them with that, but it does get to a point where actually you can mention them without the sadness. It's time, isn't it, where we'll always remember them and we'll always talk about them, but the longing and the missing isn't the emotion it once was. It's more of a positive memory, hopefully. So yeah.
Yeah, like as time's gone on, when we felt it was right to do so, and he would say, I miss my foster carer, or I miss someone in
Yes.
his sort of 3 years. Um, we would instantly just not dismiss it. We would acknowledge it, but then we would put a different spin on it and say, um, I wonder what they're up to. I bet they're shopping now, and I bet they're cooking dinner, and make him think about things in a different way.
Yeah. But it's also just occurred to me, having that 11-week transitional period, I guess that gave you quite a nice amount of time to get the house ready, didn't it? So
Mm,
what kind of things did you have to do to get your home ready for
yeah.
Daniel to come home?
Well, that's one of the top tips I would recommend is be organized, and that's like right from the off. Things from like email folders, communicating, being proactive. And that's the approach we took for getting the house ready. We were very proactive. Um, so we lent on our social worker and our support network of what do we need to do to get the house ready? What needs to be thought about? How does it need to be adapted to make it safe? So we put a lot of thought into his bedroom. As we got to know him over those 11 weeks, for me, it was the tiny little things that really made a difference. So it was like, what's his favorite color? Um, does he sleep in complete darkness? Does he have a light? Um, even things like what's his current bed setup. So at that point, he was still in a cot. Um, so we decided with our social worker and Daniel's social worker that he would transition to a bed
Right.
when he moved to us, which is a big thing, but we put a lot of thought into that. And as we got the house prepared, we started to document it and take lots of pictures and created sort of um, a book about our house and our garden and um, like everything about the house. And we shared that with Daniel, so he could also, in that 11 weeks, start to get, well, it's more towards the end, start to get excited about what's to come. We used a little teddy bear, and he was sort of doing a tour of the house. And then with the book, we gave the teddy bear to Daniel, and that worked
Oh,
really well.
yeah.
And foster carer did so much work on that, reading it daily and getting him excited.
I wish I'd spoken to you many years ago because we were not that organised. And I can remember on our first day of formal introductions, we had to drive home from the foster care. We hadn't planned on coming home. We had to drive from where we were staying back to our home because we realised that there were certain things we hadn't done. So, and it just added to the stress of introductions so much. So, yeah, top tip to everyone: get organised.
Yeah, 100%. Even things like when you are in that 2 week introduction stage, think about the transition of the child's possessions. Like how do you want to do that in a way that's right for them? Because they don't want to be at their foster carer's house and one day everything's gone. So we did that very gradually, and it was a bit painful in that we were back and forth with bootloads full of toys and clothes, but it was done in the right way. And by the time Daniel came for his sort of first afternoon with us, um, there was enough possessions there to make it feel sort of homely and a little bit familiar.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking that that's something that we can get our support networks to help with, in certain situations, so introductions are busy. And one of the things you have to do is transport things. But actually, if you're out the next day at the foster carer's home, then a friend, a family member could come round and kind of create some order for you, couldn't they? We might not find anything, but it is something they can help with in the background if it becomes overwhelming. We've spoken about so many positives, and I know you alluded to walking into the exchange event the first time was very, very difficult. But we do have to acknowledge that adoption is challenging. So, kind of looking back over your journey so far, what do you think the most challenging part has been?
I would say the most challenging part is right now. Um, the the needs of Daniel are very low level. We've not seen huge um, deregulation. He's been very settled. We've always been open with him. So in the training, that what we heard um, about and people's stories that they shared haven't really resonated with us as of yet. We're aware that they may later on. Um, but right now is really challenging because we are in the process of hopefully adopting Daniel's younger brother. And as part of that, we've had to make the decision. Well, it's the decision that's out of our hands to pause Daniel's um, adoption order because we still want to be classified as approved adopters. And if we went ahead with Daniel's adoption order, we would lose that status and it would put us back for adopting his brother. Um, so all of that has been happening since January, and it's not been plain sailing. Um, we've we're meant to transition with Daniel's brother in June. That got paused, luckily at a point where he hadn't met him face to face, which you can appreciate. You have to put your life on hold a bit. So think simple things like we had to cancel holidays, we had to sort of tell our work actually we're not going on leave, um, and it was in a way it was a little bit of a bereavement because we had our house ready, um, and we were mentally ready for a new edition and ready to unveil the story to Daniel and go on that journey. So we paused that, and then in the background there's been various appeals. Um, all being well, we should have a date for sort of October November time,
Yeah.
um, and this time rather than going early permanency foster to adopt, we are hopefully going down the adoption route, which safeguards us as a family a bit more.
Right. And that does sound really challenging to navigate because you have your personal feelings and emotions, and you mentioned grief in there, which I can understand. But then you've also got the logic of what safeguards us as a family, and if we go for an adoption order, then we have to start at the beginning of the process again. So you've got the logic that isn't always fitting with the emotions that you're feeling. And I'm guessing in the background, then, if the adoption order is still not gone through, that you are subject to visits and looked after child reviews, and so you still have the omnipresent judgment of professionals alongside the emotions and the logistics as well, and of course thinking of your own needs and Daniel's needs within the mix. Like, gosh,
Yeah,
since January.
yeah, in on reflection, and I've said this to Danny previously. Sometimes it feels like Danny and I have got this. We will sort of work together, and what I mean by that is every week there's some kind of communication with authorities, agencies, something adoption related, and we'll both be at work, and then we've got another. Our personal emails are on fire, and we're going back and forth. We're on Teams calls, home visits. Um, it it does become a lot, and I really won't miss that once the adoption orders are in place, particularly the home visits, because not so much now, but earlier this year we did see regression after those from Daniel, and it was minor regression, but it's disheartening because um, you know you come so far, and then the next month there's another visit, and the visits are always pleasant, but there is an element of it's quite transactional. For example, they will say, "Sorry, do you mind if I go upstairs to just have a look round?"
Yeah.
Um,
And you
it's
can't say no. I do
no, you
mind.
can't, and you just feel like there's an eye on you when that happens, and simple things like visits to the doctors or progress on his speech or uh, he had a fall at the swimming pool, and you instantly think, oh my god, I've got to tell them, and I've
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot, so we won't miss that.
No, I'm trying to imagine the size and scale of the party when adoption orders are in and you can wave
Oh yeah,
goodbye to.
it's gonna be good.
It's a fundamental human right, isn't it, to have that right
Yeah,
to a private family life, and that's what you've
yeah,
not had now for many years.
yeah.
Um, all for the greater good, but yeah, it's hard. Yeah,
I think as well, it's naturally become a bit of a talking point when particularly our family around. We obviously don't do it in earsight of Daniel, but I'm a bit bored of talking about it now. People are obviously naturally interested, but it becomes a point where we just want to move on as a family unit, and we will always be open with Daniel and hopefully his brother, but we just don't want to talk about it as much. um yeah.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. And so for a while after she came home, I was very proud of the adoption. It was what I'd lived and breathed for a
Mm.
number of years. I was very proud of it, and also it does leave its mark on you. So you kind of want to talk about it. You're learning how to be a parent, and you're thinking about all adoption related things all the time. And then there comes a point when you're like, I don't want everyone to see me as the adoptive parent. I am just the parent. So
Yeah.
we don't have to talk about it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly that. And with Daniel starting school 2 weeks ago, Danny and I are consciously trying to do that, in that we are parents. We don't need to sort of identify ourselves as adopted parents. That will
Mm.
naturally come, you know, when people ask. But Daniel's Daniel is Daniel, and as you get to know him, you'll find out about his journey and his story. But he's not necessarily defined by that.
Yeah. I've got a totally random question now.
Yeah.
But I'm just, have you noticed, like, has he picked up any of yours or Danny's mannerisms? Have you had a moment where you've been watching him and thought, that is so me, or?
He's very similar to me in just his general characteristics, quite calm and caring. Um, so yeah, I think he's probably picked up more of that. And he's very creative, and I think that's probably something I've brought out more. So like, we love to do baking together and arts and stuff like that. But yeah, over time, I'm seeing more of a blend of us both, which I think works really well because we're different.
Yeah. And I think it's nice to acknowledge those as well, because when our children come to us, they are those fully formed human beings, and of course they are people in their own right. But the longer they're with us, it's those little things that help cement and ground our families. I believe so. Yeah. So, um, we've spoken about the joys, we've spoken about the current challenging period that you're in, and I will be eagerly anticipating the email from you to say it's all over and you're not going to talk to me ever again. But, and I think throughout we've also kind of like thought about what other adopters might want. But, is there any kind of like standout, apart from like, be organized and other things we
Yeah.
mentioned, is there any kind of like standout advice that you think, well, actually, this is what I'd want to tell people?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a few things, and the first one is walk, don't run.
Mm.
And right from the off, make sure you've been open with people about, you're considering adoption, or you're having these feelings of you want a child, because that's what we did, and that's what led us down adoption and through an agency. And we found that period of like research and networking really important, because it was the cement which led us to have such a successful um like initial sort of like the training period and the matching and the panels. We just knew this was what we wanted.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, like at matching, naturally we were scared, and we questioned whether this was the right thing, but in our hearts we knew it was. um the next point I'd recommend is be united as a couple, um and pivot to your strengths. So if you're not good at being organized and managing loads of different communications and forms and checks, then, and if the other person is, then play to your strengths. Danny is very direct and can get things done very like efficiently and quick, whereas I'm more calm, considered. Um, so we were a really good team um, throughout that.
I
Um,
also noticed, though, something you said earlier, being united, it also kind of comes on that emotional level. So when you were first considering Daniel's profile, you
yeah,
said that Danny was like, right, kind of this is it, and he was kind of
mm,
progressing with that,
yeah,
whilst you were looking at a different profile. So
yeah,
united doesn't always mean doing exactly the same thing. It means recognizing that the other person needs to do something else, or
yeah,
perhaps just needs to work through it in a different way, might need longer to work through it, but ultimately you are going to come together to make a decision to move forward. And I just wanted to highlight that because it is, you can be united whilst having different needs and different approaches, can't you?
yeah, definitely. And I, if I hadn't gone on that journey of exploring that profile that really appealed
Yeah.
to me, I would have felt very differently. But the fact that I'd been on that journey and I'd been on a few journeys with different profiles, it then led me back to Daniel, and
Mm.
um, yeah, we just
Yeah.
communicated throughout, and
Yeah.
yeah, I completely get that to be united, you can also go off in your own directions, but then come
And
back.
then come back. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I guess last point, I mean, I've got loads of different points, but is be accommodating. Um, and what I mean by that is obviously welcome people into your house and be flexible because you're going to have to do that. But like, and I suppose it's ties into being open minded as well. Just think of different angles, especially when you're looking at profiles. We were very open with our search, age range, boys, girls, backgrounds, because it was about the match. But we were very accommodating, sort of timelines. Like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and that helped alleviate some of the emotions and pressure. We were just sort of a bit like, to a certain extent, sort of go with the flow. And I think that's really important because if you go into the adoption process and think, in a year's time we'll have a child, that's not the right approach. Um, yeah,
We speak a lot, don't we, about our children's journey and how out of control they have been of their own lives,
hmm,
because they've been removed from birth family, they've gone to probably at least one foster carer, if not more, and many of them ultimately don't have a choice about which parents they end up with either because they're too young to express their wishes.
yeah,
Um, but I also think there is a real parallel there with the adopter's journey because, as you've said, you are pretty much out. You can choose to start it, but you
yeah,
are out of control for so much of it, aren't you? And
yeah,
so that advice about trying to be accommodating and going with the flow rather than fighting for control,
hmm,
it could be helpful to some people just to be like, well, we'll flex, we'll
yeah,
flex.
yeah, yeah. I think naturally Danny and I are um, to some extent a bit the opposite. Like we want to go into things and get things done and move on. But with
Mm.
this, and I think COVID did help because it gave us that few years of reflection. Um, but yeah, we were very relaxed about it. But yeah, as I say, I just couldn't believe how quick matching happened. It was, yeah, crazy.
I've got another random question, which doesn't follow on from what we've just been talking about at all. I am sorry, but I think I'm wondering whether the two of you, when you first went through the process, did you ever at any point consider adopting siblings at the same time,
Yeah.
or were you kind of very fixed on the fact you wanted one child, or perhaps then one child and then another one later down. I'm just wondering, I mean, yeah, I don't have an end to that question. I'm just intrigued.
We were going back to that point earlier. We were really open with our search, so we did the siblings training, and we didn't really have a specific preference over having siblings or just an only child. We reflected on our experience of having nieces and nephews and thought, well, we can handle two children for like a couple of days. I'm sure we could have siblings, but when we started to look through profiles, I don't think we came across that many siblings, or if we did, they weren't placed together. Which is Daniel's case. You know, he has siblings, but he's not placed with them. It was more about the match. So when we did come across Daniel, we just knew, and we never thought until 6 months later that we started to think, oh, actually, could we adopt Daniel's brother? And it going back to that point, it's just meant to be. We believe it's in the start, almost like the stars have aligned. Um, and I think if Daniel hadn't had a younger brother, then at this point we wouldn't have siblings, and obviously we hope to have siblings. But yeah, we've always just
Yeah,
been.
very open. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, John. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sorry for the random questions out of order after, but I've just found it fascinating, and I'm going to wake up tonight thinking I should have asked him this, but I'm also going to remember for a long time the absolute joyous smile on your face when you were talking about that transitional period and then the formal introductions. So thank you so much.
We're so grateful to John for giving us such an honest glimpse into the realities and rewards of adoption. Stories like his show just how many paths there are to building a family.